Hello world, it's Birdo Prey 5, Qapla, and welcome to my review of Star Trek Lower Decks, Season 2, Episode 5, An Embarrassment of Duplers. And what is a Doopler? Apparently it's a new species that divides like a single-celled organism would, but obviously it's a humanoid, when they get embarrassed. Um, so it's basically just a mechanism for comedy for this particular episode, and we'll likely not see them again, and certainly not in any true canon real life episode of Trek. They're only practical in cartoons. Now, I'll be honest, this episode starts off with what has historically, if I recall, been a good thing, and that is right to the credits. No opening stinger. So it's nothing they can F up, which was good. I took that as a relatively good start, and I was, in the end, happy enough. So the captain is giving a captain's log, talking about what duplers do, that they duplicate due to as an emotional defense. So they've been working on eggshells, and so they've been had this representative on for a week. He hasn't duplicated once, so she's doing really well as captain. They're on their way to a starbase, and once they deliver him to the starbase unduplicated, she figures she'll be due a promotion, or at least she'll get the good Starfleet assignments, because she's every week she's been wanting more and more respect, and she's like, she'll be the only California class captain at the starbase this week. There's a giant party going on with an epic after party, and she's the only one in the California class who's going to get invited because of them battling the Packlids alongside the Titan earlier in the year for them, which was last season for us. So Boimler and Mariner are talking about his time on the Titan, and he's like, if you were still on a capital ship, you'd be guaranteed an invite to this big party. He's like, yeah, his clone has probably got the invite. And Mariner's like, wait, the Titan's on the other side of the system. They can't make it in time, which means that William can't make it to the party. So he can pose as William Boimler, and Mariner can be his +1, and they can both go to the party. And that's actually not a bad idea. And Boimler's like, let me just call my clone and make sure he's okay with it. Mariner smacks him and says, that's a stupid idea. And he realizes, yeah, that was a pretty stupid idea. Then we get to the B plot, and we've got Tendi and Rutherford, who are again, like they usually were, paired together. And in this B plot, Rutherford is working on a very compact but very realistic model of the Cerritos. And apparently it's got working phaser beams, working lasers, working force fields, working warp engines. Everything works. It's a model, to scale model. And so as an engineer, Rutherford loves building models because we all do it. And Tendi loves spending time with Rutherford, so she enjoys it too. Okay, so they just got to the starbase, and they overheard the captain talking about how hard it was for them all week to not not make them duplicate. And of course, this starts a multiple duplication event. The Duplers just start duplicating all over. They're taking over the spaceship, the Cerritos. The the Starbase says they're too dangerous to beam on board like this. So, we can't take them off your hand, and they're not allowed to dock. And so now Captain Freeman is addressing the entire ship, warning them that the Duplers are duplicating, but the more that you make them embarrassed, the more they duplicate. So she's going out of her way to not be angry at them. And she's like, just if you see them duplicate, just, go with it. Or because, reminder, if you get upset at them, they duplicate more. So Boimler and Mariner take the chaos on the bridge as an opportunity to beam over to the Starbase. And there's a Quark's bar on the Starbase. So this is the second or third Quark's bar we've seen in Lower Decks. So yes, Quark's has definitely, since the end of DS9, franchised his bar. They put on their dress uniforms, and it turns out that Mariner, who was stationed on the Starbase in the past, there's a guy who's pissed at her, and this blue guy is mad at Mariner. He said, "You stranded me on City Alpha 4, which I'll have you know is much worse than City Alpha 5, which is, of course, where Khan was stranded." And she's like, "Listen, I'm sorry I stranded you on City Alpha." Boimler says, "Yeah, she loves to strand people. She stranded me on some planet." And then so they start talking. So the blue guy says he can get them tickets to the party or location to the party. Anyway, so they just have to transport some stuff. And what is it? They're Commander Data bubble baths. And so Boimler looks at one. He says, "Are you sure this isn't a lore?" And he's like, "Some of them might be lore." So back on the Cerritos, Rutherford is being very protective of his model, and yes, basically, they're all embarrassed because they almost destroyed his model. Freeman's being too kind now to the Duplers, so now they're duplicating again. So then Mariner says, "Oh, what if we just all be silent?" And for a moment that works, until one of the Duplers says, "Oh no, they're giving us the silent treatment." And then they duper more. So what's going on with Rutherford is that he is still having trouble, and I'm kind of happy that they haven't just ignored this. Rutherford had this whole cybernetic implant pulled out, and he forgot an entire year of his life. And Rutherford is still trying to deal with it. And the deal with Rutherford is, because this model was something he was working on before he had gotten his head pulled out, his cybernetic implant pulled out, he still sees notes from the year that he doesn't remember. And he is constantly battling with himself, and he's wondering, was the old him smarter than the new him? And he's coming to the conclusion slowly throughout this episode that the old him was a better engineer than the new him. And I don't know, as someone who had a long coma and change in life circumstances, I often wonder if I wasn't smarter before. And I don't know, it hits home. That plot point hits home. What doesn't hit home is the fact that we've got like a 10-minute car chase scene Granted, it's broken up into different particular scenes, but there's 10 minutes of this episode about donated to a car chase through a starbase. We've seen starbases in Trek our entire lives. Okay, Deep Space Nine, Space Dock, K7, all the other starbases. Never, ever, never once in any of those did we ever see a need for a wheeled vehicle to go around a starbase. And in fact, it makes no sense. You could just beam anything to anywhere in a starbase you needed to. So why are there Argos all over the starbase? This really kind of took me out of it for this episode. And it was a shame because this was aiming to be a pretty good episode. But they went with these cars, and it really just pulls me out. I mean, I get why. Listen, the Argo was something Patrick Stewart wanted for what was it? Nemesis. He wanted it, and he got it. He wanted to drive, and it made for a cool, 5 minutes in a movie. Okay, and now I know the Cerritos carries Argos on it because whatever, it takes place after Nemesis, and it makes some sense. So fine, I get it. I get it. But what I don't get is why they've got to start using Argos everywhere. It doesn't make sense. They'd be using them to drive around a starbase, let alone going through walls. They're in the aviary. Anyway, there's an old man here. It's not who's it? Billsby. It's not the guy from Earth. It's not the guy from Starfleet Academy on Earth, but he's very much like him. And he's like, "Oh my God, this is how I die." And of course, the car goes over him, and then he doesn't die, and he's even more upset that he's not dead. He's like, still alive, I guess. And he's back, back to his mundane existence as the gardener of an aviary on a starbase. Aviary? Avery? I know I'm not pronouncing that right. So they're still trying to go to the party. So the blue guy is like, "Oh my God, thank the gods that you're alive, that I worship that you're alive." So they found out that they had to run from the police, which again, police in a police car, because below the soap, below the data soap were illegal Klingon disruptors. So that's why they had to run. So he tells them, okay, it was in Ballroom A, which was the obvious place for any big party. So they're at the bouncer. William Boimler, he's allowed to go in, but Mariner's not being allowed to go in. He's like, she's the +1, but she says, "Well, what ship are you on?" Mariner says, "The Voyager D." And he says, "No, you're on the Cerritos, and there's only Luna class and above only." So now Mariner is like, "Fine, just abandon me." And Boimler says, Mariner says, "You love abandoning me." And he says, I don't abandon people," Boimler says. She's like, "You abandoned me to the Titan when you went to the Titan." So this whole thing is about how she's still pissed at him for leaving for the Titan. She's like, "I've been waiting for an apology for weeks." He's like, "Why didn't you bring this up sooner?" She's like, "I don't, she didn't want to bring it up." She's like, he's like, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" He's like, "I didn't know you had feelings." She's like, "Of course I have feelings. She just didn't want to let it out." So anyway, Boimler goes in and he sees Captain Shelby, which was from TNG. Then some other captain. Then I don't know if that's supposed to be Janeway, but it kind of looked like a Janeway. They never mention her name. Um, Boimler doesn't know anybody there, and nobody knows him. So he ends up leaving. So anyway, back here at Tendi and Rutherford, they're about to die because they're going to be crushed because of these aliens duplicating. But anyway, Tendi just fills in Rutherford. Rutherford's like, if the old self could finish this model and my new self can't, then obviously my old self was a better engineer than my new self. And Tendi says, no, Rutherford, you don't understand. We never finished that model on purpose. Every time we got to the end, we started over. He's like, well, why would we do that? She's like, because as long as we were working on the model, people left us alone. It was like our own personal deflector dish. And we could just work in peace without any people bothering us. So Rutherford realizes that he's not dumber than his old self, that all these notes he can't understand, they're just squiggly lines, he just probably wrote to slow his pace. So they realize they can get out if they can blow open a hatch on the ceiling, which they can do if they eject the little micro warp core, which was in his model, which they do, and they blow it up. And of course, they get out. And of course, because he's a man, Rutherford falls, and Tendi catches him and picks him up the last few inches. But that's just par for the course in Star Trek 2021. So Tendi rescues Rutherford, and they escape. So now Boimler and Mariner end up at this old wooden bar, this old-time bar in the station, and they're talking about the Titan, and Boimler says, oh, Mariner, you can be my number one. Mariner says, no, if anything, you're my number one. So they're like, who needs to be at the best party of the year with the sliders? They can make sliders whenever they want. So they're reconciling at this old bar. So on the Cerritos, Captain Freeman has finally had enough, and she goes angry. She's like, you people need to shut up and stop being sniveling babies. And it turns out when you berate the Duplers, they recombine. And so embarrassment makes them lose control, but berating them makes them combine again. So now Captain Freeman gives commands to the entire ship to stop being nice to the Duplers. You gotta give them a piece of your mind. You gotta yell at them. And so Shax says, your pa is weak, and it disgusts me. Of course, your pa is the Bajoran energy force that they feel through your ear. Anyway, the Duplers are like, I don't know what that means, but I don't like your tone of voice. And they start recombining. The cat doctor, who has the worst mouth on the ship, just says something that everything is bleeped. Every word she says is bleeped. And a whole bunch more recombine and says, you have crossed the line. Anyway, in like 2 minutes, the engineer yells at them, everybody yells at them. They all recombine back to the original alien. So Captain Freeman's like, we can still make the party. So now this bartender says, you're not the first to miss this party after striking out. And she's been here for generations. And she points to the bar. And it says Kirk plus Spock. He's like, yeah, him and his plus one, they tried to crash the party in the 2260s something. And Mariner says, you don't look that old. Mad respect. So he's like, Kirk and Spock. Boimler's like, Kirk and Spock, Kirk and Spock. They drank here. This is amazing. This is history. And of course, you see the Doomsday Machine. You see the Phoenix. In fact, every photo, everything in that bar is something from TOS or TNG. It is, in fact, all history. Okay, so now the senior crew are ready to go up to the party, and they said, "No, you can't get in. You're not on the list." And Captain Freeman is trying to call up to the other captains. Nobody's letting him in. And then she's like, "Khan is in there. He's not even Starfleet." He's like, "No, that's the DJ." So now Freeman gives an impassioned speech that she deals with just as much crap as Picard or anyone else, that they're the best at what they do. She's Captain Carol Freeman. This is my crew, and you're letting us into that party. And of course, it didn't work. So now they end up outside the bar. And so Mariner goes out and tells her mother to come on in. The cat says one time they let the Admiral put something up her, bleeped out something. So he's like, "Well, if you're not partied out, come on. We're drinking at Kirk's old bar." Anyway, the Doopler comes and thanks Freeman for deduplicating him. She's wondering if there's any place she could relax, someplace calm. She's like, I do. So she goes transporter to Captain Transporter Room 2, and they beam the Doopler into the party. And oh, he's so embarrassed. He was beamed into a private party. So why she didn't just beam herself into the party if she knew where the party was, I don't know. But she beamed the Doopler in there. And now it's time for a new model. And it's a Quark brand Deep Space Nine model. And it comes with a Jadzia and an Esri. And it looks like a beautiful model. It looks like the old model. I had the old Deep Space Nine model, like from my teenage years, and it looks perfect. And so I love that scene. And now Mariner called Boimler his number one in front of Captain Freeman. And he's like, "No, it doesn't work like that." And Captain Freeman's like, "Yes, it does. I watched it happen." We get a glory shot of the space station with a whole bunch of ships there as it ends. Like I said, this episode was destined to be better right from the start because it had no opening stinger. The main problem with this was that there was a car chase scene that seemed to last for a lot longer than it needed to. And it was the biggest downside to this episode. The second biggest downside was the ridiculousness of a species that could exist, that could duplicate itself with no loss in mass or volume, apparently, and just keep duplicating. Whatever. I understand it's a cartoon that was for comedic value. I'll give a pass to the duplicating species. I'm not going to give a pass to the car chase because they could have done it better. They could have done a foot chase. And frankly, I think a foot chase around what was basically this station's promenade would have worked better. At one point, Mariner's like, "Oh, don't worry, the security officers here have a history of being, what did she call them? Not fraudulent, unfair or whatever, corrupt. They were corrupt. So they couldn't be arrested. If they were arrested, they wouldn't get a fair trial. Also, they had a history of being bad drivers, which again, this would mean that they were using Argos on this station even a decade plus ago when she was there the first time, which would have been previous to Nemesis and wouldn't have made much sense. I know I'm getting into minutia here, but there's no reason there should have been Argos on a space station, especially an old space station. And they made it a joke that this was one of the oldest stations, that even when they beamed on, she's like, it smells like pee, which I really don't think any old Starfleet station would smell like, but whatever. I mean, it's not the New York City subway system. At least I hope not. Um, that said, with everything, I'm giving this a 6.5. 6.5 out of 10. It was still, I think, easily the second best episode of the season after the second episode. Unfortunately, it could have been easily a 7 or even an 8 had there been, like I said, had there not been car chases and had they just been a foot chase to get away. I could have dealt with that. I think it would have made the episode a lot better. What I did like was, okay, yeah, the Kirk Spock cut into a bar was a little cheesy, but the fact that that bar had so many callbacks to TOS, especially the pictures on the wall, the Doomsday machine hanging from the ceiling. We had Zephyrin Cochrane's Phoenix warp ship on the bar. We had some other stuff behind the bar. It was just, is it member berries or is it just history? It was meant to be his history. And I liked it. That I did like. So 6.5 out of 10. Fairly good episode for the season. Now, this is the 5th episode. We're halfway through the season of 10 episodes. Yesterday was Star Trek Day. We did get trailers for, we got a mid-season trailer for Lower Decks, which isn't worth reviewing because there's nothing much there. It just gives us some ideas what's coming up for the rest of the season. We got a full-on trailer for Picard Season 2. That I may do a separate review on. We also got to meet the cast of the upcoming main cast of Strange New Worlds, which has definitely taken a turn I didn't expect. So I may do a video on that too. I might combine that with the Picard trailer. So keep an eye out. And we've got a trailer on Star Trek Prodigy, a legit actual trailer. And oh my God, does Prodigy look awful. And I know on the last trailer, I said the ship looked wonderful. And the ship did look wonderful in that trailer. It was actually the opening credits. But man, the actual animation of this show, where the characters are concerned, this is downright awful. It's as bad as I could imagined and then some. So I don't know what's going to come out of Prodigy. But I will have more Trek videos out sooner than later. Please keep an eye out. With that, thank you all. Please remember to comment, like, share, subscribe, and bird out. Qapla.